Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jason and today I'm going to be showing you everything that I read in October. But before we get started, just remember that if you like infrequent posting, stuffed penguins, and chaotic energy, make sure to subscribe, I guess. I have really got to work on selling myself better. So I read a lot of great books in October. I don't want to waste any time, so let's jump in. So if you watched my What I Read in September, you will know that I was finishing the month off reading Legendborn, which I did end up finishing in October, so it counts. Legendborn by Tracy Deonn. This book was really fantastic. I really loved it. To me, this book is the young adult type of books that everybody's really into right now. You know, things like The Cruel Prince or Throne of Glass, but with one key difference. It has a ton of representation. And the representation is done really well. None of it is done just for the sake of representation. It's done in a really thoughtful, smart way, and it really adds depth to every single character that it touches. Essentially, Legendborn is a modern day story that takes Arthurian legends and puts a spin on them, then brings them into the current day, respects the Arthurian legends as they were, but kind of uses that mythology to build a new mythology for this story. And it's really great, and I recommend you read it. And I gave it a 5 out of 5, and it was an excellent way to start October. Next up, I read Flamer by Mike Curato. Now, Flamer is a graphic novel. It is all done in one. You don't need to buy multiple volumes. It's all here. It's a whole thing. It's a book, but with pictures. It's a picture book. It's a graphic novel. Yikes. Flamer deals with a young man who is in a scout group and dealing with his summer camping experience, and also him like coming to terms with his sexuality, realizing that he's gay, which is incredibly difficult for him because he is in the Scouts and he's also in the Catholic Church. Although they're coming around, right? You know what? Let's not get into it because that's a whole other video on a whole other channel with a whole other host and a whole different penguin. I really loved this. It was a fantastic read. I read it cover to cover because I couldn't put it down. Really, beautiful artwork. It's not like incredibly detailed artwork, but when it needs to be like really striking, it is. And it does a great job of telling this very effective story. Okay, this next one was definitely a favorite this month. I did not expect to like this book as much as I did. I think a lot of times when you go into a book and you just have really low expectations, a book or a movie or a video game or your breakfast, if you go into any of those things with low expectations, sometimes you will be shocked by how good those things are. So next up is Shine by Jessica Jung. Now, the reason I didn't go into this with high expectations is I just think, books written by celebrities can be very hit or miss. They can be very good, they can be meh, or they can be like terrible. So it's kind of rolling the dice. Shine is the story of a young girl who is in a K-pop group in Korea, obviously. She is a Korean American, so she moved to Korea to be in this group with her family, and it deals with, a lot of the harshness and the difficulty of being a K-pop star. It also deals with just being a teenager, and I think it does all of that really well. It's a balancing act, and it works really well. I was really surprised to see how much she went into kind of the sexism of the K-pop industry, the overworking of the K-pop industry, the insane pressure of the K-pop industry. Like, she really touches on all of this in this book, which I thought was really cool. So Shine was excellent, and I highly recommend it, especially if you're looking for something that is diverse, that is by an own author, and that also is maybe a story of something that you've never read about before, because there's really not that many books about K-pop out there, right? So I think you'd really like this one. I think you might enjoy it more if you already do have some familiarity with K-pop, but I think you could enjoy it either way. So everybody's been telling me that the Dresden Files are excellent, so this month I decided to jump in. So I have 2 Dresden Files books on this list. I'm going in chronological order, so the first one I read was Stormfront, which is the first book. I really enjoyed this book. I think the magic system is really interesting. I think the main character is really interesting. I think that you might not enjoy this book if you don't love the gruffness of the main character. Like, the main character is very, like, a guy's guy. Like, for better or worse. Sometimes for the better, sometimes for the worse. The way he talks about the women in his life is often kind of gross. But don't hate me for saying this, it kind of fits his character. I know that sounds weird. Like, normally, if a main character was talking, like, kind of suggestively about all the women in his life, that would be really a put-off for me from a book. But for some reason in this crime noir world with this really like gruff male character, and he even like makes a comment saying like, I know I'm outdated in the way I think about women. He acknowledges the fact that he's kind of a jerk. And I appreciate that. And I don't know, it really does fit the character, and it never was like flat out offensive. It just was, if anything, was more old school. Not saying it's right. Anyway, I've spent a lot of time talking about that now, so I think you understand where I'm coming from with this. That being said, I really enjoyed the book. I thought the magic system was great. I thought the mystery was great. I thought the characters were really interesting, and I was really excited to read the next one. It was a super fast read. So, Stormfront by Jim Butcher. If you follow me on any channel, you'll already know my thoughts on this next one, but I'll keep it short and sweet because I've talked about this book a lot. So next up was The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab. What can I say about this book that I haven't already said? In my review that I posted on TikTok and Instagram, I called this my favorite book I've ever read, and I meant that. I really, really, really loved this book. It's essentially about a young woman who makes a deal with a dark god, and in the deal, you know how dark gods like twist deals. So it basically makes it that anytime someone meets her, after they're out of eyesight of her for a few minutes, they forget her completely, no matter who it is, her parents, her family, her friends that she makes, and she also can't die. So she's living this just incredibly long life where nobody can remember her and she has no connections. The story is really realized very well. The writing is absolutely stunning, gorgeous, beautiful writing, super moving, especially really great if you're someone who just loves books. I think it does really great things for people who love stories, and absolutely stunning book. Easily V.E. Schwab's best novel she's ever written, though, I mean, she's written a lot of really great stories, so that's also very high praise. I absolutely recommend this book to anyone. It was fantastic. So I gave it 7 out of 5 because Addie has 7 freckles on her face, right? But if I wasn't trying to make some weird homage to the book, I would have given it a 10 out of 5. It's so absolutely fantastic. Okay, so next up, people have been wanting me to read this for a while. I'm definitely going to continue reading the series, but I started The Infernal Devices reading Clockwork Angel by Cassandra Clare. So this book was a little bit of a mixed bag for me. I absolutely loved the new characters introduced in this book. I thought they were super interesting. I really liked the world. I like this like Victorian London world. Taking the Shadow Hunters into that realm just feels so natural. Definitely enjoyed this more than Mortal Instruments first book. What I will say is there is a lot of time spent reintroducing to the world, in case you're someone who's not read the Mortal Instruments, so you easily could start from here. As someone who'd already read that series, I found that part of the book to be a little bit of a drag, a little bit long-winded, but I understand why it was there. There's not a whole lot of like really excellent plot here. Like there is a plot, but it's very like, it's kind of throwaway, whereas the real star of this show is the characters, and they're all really fantastic. So I gave this a 4 out of 5. I really did enjoy it, and I'm excited to read the next one. Next up, we have Almost American Girl, which was by Robin Ha. Now, again, this is another graphic novel. It tells the story of a young Korean woman who doesn't really fit in Korea. Her mom moves her to America, where her mom is going to marry this man, and kind of like looking for a better life for themselves. And it really deals with her having to like fit into the American school system, and dealing with that and bullying against Asians and things like that. Really good, really moving. I feel like even for someone who reads a ton of diverse books, I love when I read a book by an own author and I feel like I learned something. And I felt like I learned so much from this book about just the differences between Korea and America and what it's like for someone to come here in high school and have to kind of assimilate to the American way. And I just thought it was a really great book, but I really enjoyed this, especially if you're looking to get more into comics. This is a very easy read. It's a great place to start. It's very indie as far as a comic goes, and I definitely recommend it, so check it out. All right, so first book that I wasn't a huge fan of for this month was actually Skyhunter by Mary Lou. I was really excited for this book. This is a kind of dystopian world. There's a young woman, her job is to kill these evil like ghost things, which are basically human experiments that have turned into like White Walkers, except in like spider form, if you can imagine. And then there's this boy who comes from the nation that they're at war with, and he is a runaway. So she kind of gets tasked with, kind of looking after him. I think the problem with this book is that there's so much plot. So this is an opposite problem to some of the other books I read this month. There's so much plot, there's so much action that I felt like I got to know the characters very little. I felt like I didn't connect with them at all. I think the world is really interesting. I would be definitely interested to read a second book to see if now that we understand the world and she's got all that world building out of the way, which is really good world building, by the way, that we could maybe get more of a story from it. So I definitely will read book 2. I just wasn't that impressed by book 1. Next up, I read the second book in the Dresden Files, Full Moon. As you can tell by the title, it dealt more with werewolves. I'm not going to go super into this as much because I already kind of talked about my thoughts on Dresden Files, and it doesn't much change from book 1 to book 2, but I did really enjoy like what he does with the characters, and I'm still having fun with the series, so I'm excited to keep reading this series. And I hear it gets better and better and better, and I already really like it, so I can only imagine how good it's going to get. Full Moon by Jim Butcher. Okay, this next one was really good. This was Where We Go From Here, which was by Lucas Rocha. This is a Brazilian author, so it has been translated into English. This is the story of three teens who are dealing with HIV in different forms. So one of the characters has just gotten diagnosed with HIV at the beginning of the book. One of them has been living with it for a while and is undetectable. And another one finds out that that the guy he's seeing, it's not his boyfriend, he finds out the guy he's seeing has it and has to kind of cope with if he's going to continue seeing that person or if it's too much for him to handle. Mostly what I loved about this book is, as someone that's part of the queer community, I think it was really eye-opening to me how much I learned about HIV from this book. And that is to say, I didn't realize how much I didn't know about HIV, especially about how far treatment has come. You know, when we hear about HIV and we talk about HIV, if we're not like directly exposed to it, I think we still have this idea of HIV as it was in the 90s. And it just was super interesting for me to see how HIV has progressed and how treatment has progressed and how the way we talk about it has progressed. And just watching these three teens kind of sort through HIV as part of their lives was really inspiring and really beautiful. And I think it was done really, really, really well. So this is a first-time author, and it's also an author from another country. I just really think you owe it to yourself to read this book. If you're affected by HIV in any way, I think you would get a lot out of this book. It does have a very positive, obviously there's drama, because of the subject matter, but it does have a very positive, forward-thinking mindset about HIV, and I think that's really important, especially for people who are going through it in 2020. Next up, we have Punching the Air, which was by Zoboi and Yusef Salaam. Now, this is a book told entirely in poetic verse. It basically tells the story of a young man who is essentially imprisoned wrongfully, and we really kind of look into the prison system, how kind of a mess it is, but there's also just a lot of hope. One of the authors of this book was actually part of the Central Park Five, so it has a lot of realism to it. At points, it is incredibly disturbing, incredibly upsetting, but I was surprised by how hopeful and beautiful and, really open about this situation, which is truly awful, that's going on and happening to many people constantly in the United States and probably some other countries as well. So definitely highly recommend this book. Really beautiful, especially if you're looking to read something that is poetic verse and just really excellent book. So highly recommend Punching the Air. It was spooky season, and I hadn't really read many spooky books, so I picked up and read These Witches Don't Burn by Isabel Sterling. I did enjoy this book. It does have gay female representation, which I thought was great. I really liked the magic. I liked the way that they talked about magic. I liked the way that they talked about witches. I really enjoyed the characters, especially the main character. I liked her a lot. And this book also heavily deals with going through a breakup. And still having to deal with that person in your life. And I just really liked how it was done. I thought it was really well represented as far as a relationship status. I really enjoyed it. So if you're looking for something witchy and you want some female queer representation, highly recommend. Last but not least, I finished up the month with A Deadly Education by Naomi Novik. Now, this was easily my biggest disappointment of the month, and it was my last book of the month, which is So A Deadly Education is the story of this evil magical school. So people go there to learn how to be, magic users, and there's no teachers in the school. The school basically pushes you to do better at your studies in different magical ways. But there's also really evil monsters that are always trying to eat you no matter what. Are you getting your lunch? There's probably a monster trying to eat you. Are you going to the bathroom? There's probably a monster trying to eat you. The world building here is fantastic. Some of the best world building I've seen. Now, the unfortunate thing is that there's all this world building and there's really no plot. There's no storyline. You heard me just tell you what this book is about, and I mostly mentioned the school and the world because that's really what the book is. It's just endless internal dialogue about this school and about this girl's day-to-day life with really no storyline. And that hurts the book a lot. I will also mention, though I'm not going to fully go into it here in this video because I think it's something better researched on your own, there are some implications of some racial stereotyping in this book that people have kind of called Naomi Novik out for. I would definitely recommend, if you are in any way considering reading this book, please do some research first, just so you know what you're going into. I'm not telling you shouldn't read the book because of those things, but I think it's important to know about them going into the book so that you can properly evaluate it yourself. Guys, thank you so much for going on this journey with me. I'm so excited for the books that I'm planning to read in November. I have a lot of really, really fun ones hopefully lined up. I'm going to still try to read quite a bit in November despite everything else that's going on. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you read some great books in October. If you read anything really amazing, please let me know in the comments. As always, make sure to like and subscribe. Thank you for hanging out with me for a little bit, and I hope you have a wonderful day and a wonderful November. And of course, as always, happy reading.